Hello and welcome back to Animated Banners in CSS. In our last video, we created this looping snow animation, which as far as animations go is pretty easy to put together. We only had a starting and an ending keyframe, and then we had it loop infinitely. Well, now we're going to start to talk about the rest of our animations, and this is where it's going to get a little more complicated, because we have some text that's going to animate off the stage while other text animates in, and then we have this image over here, which if you remember also has a snowman on it, and this image is going to animate up and down to switch out the tree with the snowman and back and forth. So it's going to get a little more complicated as we move forward. And in order to keep everything straight, it's really going to behoove us to organize our animation a little bit. And I'm going to do that by using a chart. So I'm going to jump into Photoshop, and I've put an empty chart in the Assets folder, and it's called chartempty.jpg. I'm just going to open that up in Photoshop, and we're going to plan out our animation using this chart. So here's what I want to happen. At the very beginning of our animation, we're going to have a few items animate onto the stage over the course of 1 second. This is going to include the tree, the first heading, and the first two paragraphs that say winter sale. So that'll be the introductory animation. After that's done, I want to have a 12-second looping animation where a few different things happen. First of all, we're going to have a 5-second delay. This 5-second delay will occur after our initial items have animated onto the stage. Then we'll have a 5-second delay to give the user time to read all of the content in the banner. And then we'll have a 1-second transition where the text moves off and then the next set of text comes in and the tree turns into a snowman, etc., etc. So that transition will last 1 second, and once all of our text gets into place there, we'll have another 5-second delay where the user will have time to read the second set of text that comes onto the stage. Then we'll have another 1-second transition where it transitions back to the first set of text and the first set of content. And then it will loop back here where we have that 5-second delay, and it will just loop over and over again. So this white section over here to the right is going to loop over and over again, whereas this first column here, this first initial transition where the text and the tree are initially coming onto the banner or animating onto the stage, that's just going to happen once. So I'm going to use my brush tool here as we illustrate what needs to happen as we plan this out on our chart. So in the first second, our tree and snowman are going to animate, and what we're going to get is the tree. So I'm going to create a new layer so that I can actually draw on this. And I'm just going to write the word tree here. This is where the tree is going to animate on over the course of a second. Heading 1 is going to animate on, and then paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 are going to animate on. Heading 2, paragraph 3, and paragraph 4 are all going to stay where they are. They're going to start off to the side of the stage or off to the side of the banner where we can't see them. So initially, all we're going to see is the tree, heading 1, and the first 2 paragraphs. Paragraph 1 says winter, paragraph 2 says sale. They're going to animate in from different directions. So that's going to be the initial animation that only happens once, and then after that comes our loop. Now you'll notice I've put some percentages here as well, and these percentages aren't exact, but they don't really need to be. I've decided that I want our delay time here to be about 5 seconds long, so we have 2 different times when we're going to have that 5-second delay. So that makes up for 10 seconds. Then we have a 1-second transition here and a 1-second transition over here. That's another 2 seconds. So we have 12 seconds that's going to be looping. We're ignoring this 1 second over here because that first column, that's not going to be looping. It's the 12 seconds over here on the right that are going to be looping. Well, if you take that first delay of 5 seconds and divide 5 into 12, you get 41.6666%. So I've just rounded that up to 42%. So this 5-second animation is going to take up 42% of the time of the total elapsed time of our animation. So our other 5 seconds is going to take up another 42%. Again, this isn't exact. We're going to make a 12-second animation, and 42% of that 12 seconds isn't exactly 5 seconds, but it's pretty close to it. And I want to use nice round numbers here so it'll be easy to figure out. So if our 2 5-second delays add up to 84%, that leaves us with 16% left over for our two transitions. So divide that by 2, and that leaves us with 8% of our animation time for these two transitions. So another way we can put this, if we're thinking in terms of the keyframes we're going to be creating, we'll go back to my brush tool here. At this line right here, this represents 0% of the way into the animation. Once our 5-second delay is over, we're then 42% of the way into the animation. After our 1-second transition, or approximately 1-second transition, another 8% of our time will elapse, bringing us to 50% of the way through the animation. Another 42% later, after the second delay, that'll bring us to 92% through the animation. And then after the transition, we'll be at 100%. So these are some of the numbers we're going to need to keep in mind as we're creating our keyframe animations. So the next issue is, how do we want these transitions to occur? As for the delay, nothing is going to be happening during the delay except for the repeating snow animation, which we've already taken care of. So I'm just going to draw a big X through here because nothing's going to happen in this section and nothing's going to happen in this section. What we need to plan out is what's going to happen in the 1 second or in the 8% transition time when we're animating from one state to the next. I don't want everything to just animate all at the same time. That's kind of boring. I want to stagger the animations a little bit. So one item will start animating in, and then a quarter of a second later, another item will start animating in, and we'll get this nice staggered effect that's going to look really nice. Now, since the tree/snowman image is such a large image, I want to go ahead and take up the entire second for that particular animation. So here, I'm just going to type snowman because we'll be animating the snowman on, and then you can probably figure out that we'll be animating back to the tree over here. So we'll basically just be moving that image up and down in order to make that transition take place. But as far as the timing of it is concerned, it's going to be pretty easy. It's going to take up that entire 8%. So the beginning of this animation will occur at 42%, and the end of the animation will occur at 50%. Now, if we move on to the next row, which is heading 1, at this point, for this first transition, we're going to be animating heading 1 off. And I want this animation to start at the same time as our tree snowman animation, but I only want it to take half a second. And then the animation that occurs with our paragraph text, I want it to occur a quarter of a second later. So again, our snowman and our heading 1 are all going to occur at the 42% mark. That's when those animations are going to start. But the heading 1 animation is only going to take half a second. And this column here spans an entire second. So I'm just going to draw a line here to cut that column in half. And right here, I'm going to put 0.5, which means half a second. But we really need to think of this in terms of percentages. So if a full second represents 8%, then a half second is going to be 4%. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to write 4% here, which means we have another 4% over here on the right. So for the first 4%, we're going to animate this off, and for the second 4%, we're going to have a delay. So I'm just going to put a big D there for delay. So we can tack that delay on to this next delay that's coming up afterwards where everything is sitting still. Okay, so that's heading 1. Heading 2, I want it to come in as the other one's coming off. So we can divide this one into 2 as well. And for that 4% here, we want to animate the second heading on. And then for the other 4%, we'll have another delay there. So then we have our paragraphs. Paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 are going to animate off here, and then paragraph 3 and paragraph 4 are going to animate on at the same time. But we want it to be a little bit staggered. We don't want it to start at the same time as everything else. We want it to wait about a quarter of a second and then start animating on. So we're going to divide this into a quarter and then a half and then another quarter. So this first quarter second, now if half a second is 4%, then a quarter of a second is going to be half of that. It's going to be 2%. So we'll just put 2% right here, 2% over here, and that leaves us with 4% in the middle. So for the first 2%, we're going to have a delay. Nothing's going to happen for the first quarter second here. But for the next half second after that, we're going to animate paragraph 1 off. So we'll write an off here. and then another delay, another quarter-second delay after that is finished, and then we can tack on that quarter-second delay to this delay next to it. Similarly, for paragraph 2, we're going to do the exact same thing. So we don't need to write the percentages again. We'll just type D for delay, off, and then delay. And then everything else is going to come on as this one's coming off. So we're going to have the same delays for paragraph 3 and paragraph 4, but these are going to be animating on as the other two animate off. And that's how that particular transition is going to work. So not everything's going to come in at the same time. Instead, these first 3 items are going to come in right at the 42% mark, but the other 4 items are going to animate starting at the 44% mark, because remember, this extra delay is an extra 2%. So this mark right here is at 44%, and it will end 4% later right here. So if we want to, we can come over here and put a couple of extra marks here for 44%. There's going to be one at the halfway mark, halfway between 42 and 50, and that's going to be 46%. And then over here, we're going to have 48% representing this line right here. So that should give us a better idea of when these animations need to start and stop. So then we just need to do the reverse for our final 1-second column over here for our final transition. We're just transitioning back to the original state that we were at the 0% mark. So for these two, we're going to cut that in half. We're going to animate it on over the course of 4% and then have a delay at the end. We came off here and we're coming back on over here. Similarly, for heading 2, we animated it on here, and over here we're going to animate it back off for that first 4%, and then we'll have a delay afterwards. Then, see if we can do this here. In fact, I'm going to hold on to Shift as I drag down so we can keep a straight line there, and we'll do it again over here. And for our first 2%, we're going to have a delay all the way down. And here we're going to have a delay all the way down on the end. And then we'll do the opposite of what we did over here. We'll animate the first 2 on instead of off, and we'll animate the last 2 off. And that gives us a pretty good chart of what we need to do with our animation. So we can come over here to this section and mark up these lines here. So right here, it's going to be 94%. At the halfway mark here, that's going to be at 96%. And at this mark right here, it's going to be 98%. So that again gives us a good idea of when these looping animations for these 7 items need to occur, as well as what the keyframe breakpoints are for this animation. So as we start creating our animations in CSS, we're going to refer to this chart off and on so that we can know when we need to start our animations, when we need to stop them, and how long we need to put in our delays for. So now that I've done that, I want to go ahead and save this for the web so that you can have a copy of this. And I'm just going to call this chart finished.jpg. And we'll again reference that chart whenever we need to figure out the timing of our animations. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.